The key institutions of the UK, we won't spend a lot of time on Her Majesty, unfortunately. The Queen, the monarch, is the head of state. It's a traditional position, inherited, ceremonial duties, and part of the dignified part of the British system. Another dignified part of the system is the House of Lords. Remember that Lords consists of wholly unelected peers. They have both life peers, who are named for the House of Lords during their lifetime, and hereditary peers, limited in number since the House of Lords Reform Act of '99, those who are there because their fathers were lords, etc., etc. The two big powers for lords are that they can delay and amend legislation, so they can hold legislation up and make Commons think about it and make the public think about it. They can also tweak the language, send it back to Commons, but it is Commons that will have the ultimate power. Lords also is able rather to debate controversial issues. They don't have to get reelected, so that they can do that without fear of electoral recrimination. So sometimes they are referred to as the conscience of the nation as a result of that. So there we go with Lords. Off to now the place where the power is. It is in the House of Commons. 650 MPs in Commons. It is an SMD plurality electoral method. Please don't think it's party list. A lot of you will. Please remember it is one person representing an individual geographic constituency. And it is people vote for an individual in each of those constituencies representing a party. Usually there is a majority in Commons, and it has been a couple of times in the last 5 to 7 years where that has not been the case. But historically, there almost is always a majority in Commons, which means, due to the fact that there is very strong party line voting in Commons, you get a prime minister who is assured of passage, because as long as the party votes with the prime minister, there will be a majority. All it takes is a majority to pass legislation. Remember the setup that we talked about with Commons. You have a front bench on both sides. The front bench is the leadership of the major parties and the other parties as well, but we tend to talk about the big two. The front bench is on the majority party side is the government. It's the prime minister and the cabinet. And the front bench of the opposition is known as the shadow cabinet. It is the opposition leader along with his or her leadership as well. The big positions that we need to know, and there are really only a couple that I'll mention here. The prime minister, of course, is the head of government, and the chancellor of the exchequer is the expert on the economy, essentially the finance minister of the United Kingdom. And so the shadow chancellor on the opposite side is on the opposition side is the opposition's expert on the economy, and so forth. Those are the big positions, along with others such as foreign secretary and so forth, home secretary. It's a very adversarial debate process, as you've seen with the prime minister's questions. The prime minister's questions and other question time with the other ministers is one of the checks on the majority party power. There are others. The backbench is the people who are not in leadership positions on both sides. And so you have MPs on both the governing side and the opposition side who may serve as a check on power. The media is a check on power. And of course, the electorate is the ultimate check on power, because both major parties want to get elected and reelected. By-elections are elections that are undertaken to the general public when there is the need to fill a vacant seat due to death or retirement. And then there is a free vote that can take place within Commons, and that is for party members, or members of Parliament, I should say, when the party leadership gives them the ability to vote their conscience on a particular matter without fear of party discipline being imposed on them. And Commons is part of the efficient part of the system, along with the Prime Minister. Speaking of which, the Prime Minister is the head of government, known as the first among equals. She is the head of government, and she is an MP. So remember that the prime minister is not elected in a direct national election. The prime minister is elected first as a party member in a particular constituency, and then by virtue of her being the head of the party that wins, becomes the prime minister. So leader of the biggest party in Commons chooses her ministers from within Parliament. They have to, that's that fusion of powers for sure, and then chooses the cabinet and replaces cabinet members every now and then, of course. Prime minister must be selected once every 5 years, and that is a law that changed in 2011 with the Fixed Parliamentary Term Act of 2011. Previously, it had been at least once every 5 years. They made it more difficult to have early elections. You can have early elections now, but it's got to be with a 2/3 vote in Parliament. So not just whenever it's convenient for the major party. The prime minister does campaign for and represent the major part or the majority party in the parliamentary elections, and everyone knows that, as does the leader of the opposition for their party. The prime minister has been, I think, more presidentialized since Tony Blair came to office in '97, and the prime minister's residence is number 10 Downing Street. The cabinet of the United Kingdom is made up of a couple of dozen MPs, generally speaking. Remember that they have to be members of Parliament. That's part of that fusion of powers that's critical in a parliamentary system. They do, in fact, get governed by that principle of collective responsibility, which is the notion that all cabinet members must publicly support the government's policy, or else they are expected to resign from the cabinet. It is a way to show the public that there is discipline within the party, that the cabinet is united, the government's united. The cabinet is typically made up of party leaders and combination of experienced members and newer members, maybe a representation of society to a degree. They may not all be experts in their portfolio, however, the department in which they run. That expertise lies with the permanent secretaries and others in the higher civil service. And if there is a no confidence vote that goes through, it is the cabinet, along with the prime minister, that has to resign. When a prime minister is choosing her cabinet, she must take into consideration a number of things. They will be the members of the same party, unless there is a coalition in place. Yes, party leadership, but also a blend of youth and experience to socialize new members, along with rewarding party loyalists. Balance of opinion. You have to balance out the factions. That's where Thatcher got into problems. Ideally, including members of different groups in society. And you want people who are talented, most certainly. The bureaucracy and civil service in the UK is really important. That is where the expertise lies. Remember, you're going to see this referred to in either of these two ways, bureaucracy or civil service. The upper level bureaucrats are known as higher civil servants, and the highest of all of them in each department or executive department is the permanent secretary. They are the heads of each department. They have much more expertise than ministers. Permanent secretaries are ones that don't change with the political winds. They have terrific discretionary power as they oversee how policy is actually going to be implemented, and they work their way up in the ranks over the course of time. Civil servants in the UK, as other countries, they implement policy, they run the departments, they deliver services as directed by the government. In the UK, they reside office-wise in Whitehall, and oftentimes you have an overrepresentation of people from either Oxford or Cambridge. And in the UK, you oftentimes have interest groups which will lobby senior civil servants and party leaders rather than the backbench, because the backbench are typically going to just go along with what the party wants anyway. Judicially in the UK, we have a relatively weak branch, not in terms of the rule of law, because the rule of law is strong in the UK, but the judiciary in the UK, because of the notion of parliamentary sovereignty, in which all decisions made by Parliament are final, and legally a law passed by Parliament is is legal. The judiciary has been weakened in terms of its overseeing of the British government and so forth. Common law used in the United Kingdom, and there is no judicial review. The courts are independent, and like I said, strong rule of law. Formerly, the biggest or the highest judges, if you will, were in the House of Lords as law lords, and that was the case until the Constitutional Reform Act of 2005, in which Blair said, let's have a Supreme Court, which then took effect in 2009. They are the highest judges in the land now. They don't have formal judicial review, however, and you can check that in the CPM for some other good indicators. Party-wise in the UK, from an institution-wise piece in the last bit here, it is a 2+ system. Historically, the Labour and the Tories since World War II have been the big two. The Liberal Democrats emerged in the 1980s and became stronger in the 90s as kind of the plus member. Lib Dems got wiped out in the 2015 elections. UKIP stole some thunder from as far as a third party from a popular support standpoint, but UKIP has not been able to be historically electorally successful in winning seats in Commons. They had one, now they had none. They did drive the Brexit debate in large part, though. Strong party ID and strong party image in the UK. Party ID is the degree to which people identify with a particular party, whereas party image is what is the thought bubble that people have when they think of a party. SMD plurality does mess up the chances of smaller parties, be it the Lib Dems or UKIP or the others. So whenever you get that question about what's the effect of the British electoral system, it's going to be that it overstates the victories of the big two, and it hurts the chances of the other. Big parties in the UK are catch-all. They control most of the seats. There are 350 safe seats roughly in the UK, and so the parties are kind of guaranteed one or the other to win in one of those safe seats. In the other ones, and remember, so we've talked about this in class too, but if a party runs someone in an unsafe seat, then that means they are running a political newcomer to test their mettle in that case. Parachuting has become more rare, but it is still allowed in the UK, where they can run candidates in a constituency in which they don't have residents. Recruitment's through the party. There is no federal system, so you got to work your way up through the party. And from a party standpoint, class was the single biggest factor in determining electoral loyalties in the 20th century, but that has in fact weakened.